everybody. I think our moderator Heather is having some technical difficulties at the moment. I think her screen is frozen. Um, Sandy, can you just confirm that you can see and hear all of us in the chat?
Yes, here I
Yes.
am. Okay, so hopefully, what is going on Heather's end can be fixed. I don't think I can do anything here. It all looks normal. So to give her a couple of minutes, let's start with a question for me that I'm going to come up with on the fly. You know what? I'll ask you the same question that I asked the last panel, which is, what is your favorite book crush? So somebody, any book, doesn't have to be yours. Somebody fictional that you have been crushing on, and why? And if you can tie it to the panel, topic about intimacy, then you get bonus points. We'll start with Jane.
This is always hard because whenever I'm asked questions off the cuff in a panel, my immediate thought is like, I've never read a book in my life.
Right, I know.
I don't know anything, I swear. So it's really hard. I do actually have a number of fictional crushes. It's hard to like cycle through them, but I know one off the top of my head for sure has to be Melissa Braden's Soho Loft series, like the first book of that. I think it was the
Brooklyn?
one that's in the title. It's terrible that I can't remember this because I adore
Um,
that book.
Kiss the
Jessica
Girl?
Lennox. Jessica Lennox,
Oh yeah,
Kiss the Girl.
yeah.
She's a wonderful ice queen with like a heart of gold. And she doesn't let people in very easily. So it definitely does tie into the intimacy. Thank you for the bonus points. Because when you do let her in, everything is amazing. It's like super warm and wonderful, but you have to get past that icy exterior. So I think ice queens are really interesting characters to delve into when you are talking about the idea of intimacy and like what that means to the characters.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, that's a great example. Claire, how about you? Fictional crush.
I'm trying to think as well. I crush on all my own characters. Like whenever you're making your own characters, you're making all of your sort of ideal partners from little snippets. Like they're all, if you mix them all together, you'd probably have your ideal person, really, wouldn't you? But yeah, rather than just going for one, I would say sort of that sort of powerful figure with the heart of gold. So you have to have, everybody's attracted to like a power woman in a power suit, right? So, but you have to have something else underneath, which I think lends itself to this panel too, because it's about getting to know somebody on that deeper level. So
Mm,
it's being attracted to maybe what's on the outside, but then being really attracted to somebody whenever you learn what's underneath.
yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Marie, how about you? Fictional
So
crush.
this is yeah, so this is actually not a romance novel or anything to do with intimacy, but the book The Assistants by Camille what's her last name? Camille Perry. Um the main character basically accidentally steals a bunch of money on the corporate credit card and pays off her student loans, and then she starts doing it purposefully for other people, and it's such a like wish fulfillment book, and they end up starting a program, and to me that's just so badass that I have a crush on the character.
That's awesome. A modern day Robin Hood. Okay, I'm going to leave you in Heather's capable hands.
Sorry about that. There is nothing more fun than having your system crash just as a webinar starts.
Welcome back, Heather.
Thank you. Thank you. Have introductions been done, or you've just been chatting?
No, just chatting, just chatting.
Okay, well, let me do the intros. Okay. First off, uh, we have Claire Forsythe, a contemporary romance author from Belfast in Northern Ireland. She lives with her partner, their very energetic 3-year-old, and a couple of pets, a dog and a cat. I've seen the dog, so
He's there
I know
somewhere.
that's true. So chaos is pretty much the default in that household. She fits riding around her job and being a mom, usually grabbing whatever quiet moments she can. She started writing during the pandemic and hasn't managed to stop since. She now has 3 sapphic romance novels out, with a fourth in the editing stages. She loves writing stories full of chemistry, tension, and messy emotional relationships that feel authentic and worth the journey. Okay.
Thank you.
Then
Hi,
we have then we have Jane Walsh, who is a wallflower who has already found her cherished lady in waiting and now spends her time twirling her fan and sipping her tea as she writes about scandalous and passion-filled love affairs. When she is not working on her next Regency romance or snuggling her cat Marlowe, she is yearning for a 19th century rest here by the seaside. I think most of us want that here by the seaside. How
Absolutely.
terrible that would be. And the last that's on right now is Marie Incontrera is a multi-hyphenate creative, entrepreneur, author, and award-winning musical theater composer, which is awesome. She lives in Hell's Kitchen with her cat, her piano, and her ever-growing collection of playbills. When she's not writing musicals or mentoring writers, she's running a full-time marketing business. So Marie is quite busy most of the time. Okay. And there was supposed to be a fourth person, but as they are not with us at this moment. Oh,
I'm
wait.
here. Can you hear me?
Yes, she's here. Lissandra's
I
here.
apologize. I had some issues with the app, so I had to sign on through my browser. So I apologize
Oh, no
for
worry.
my tardiness.
I crashed right when this started, so this is good. As Lissandra, a Midwesterner powered almost entirely by coffee, cheese, and a variety of Spotify playlists. Lissandra works in communications and is the author of Royal Rush, 75 Days to Fall in Love and Changing the Game. She enjoys writing stories filled with tension and longing, and featuring imperfect women who fall head over heels for each other. She's a mom to an amazing inquisitive daughter and a yellow lab, both of whom firmly believe they're the ones really in charge. When she's not writing, she's reading, spending time outdoors, sweating through hot yoga, or exploring the world with her loved ones. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for being here on this panel. Okay, so the topic is intimacy beyond sex. So we all know a good sexy scene is nice to have in a lot of books, but as a lot of us know from personal relationships, that's just one tiny facet of intimacy. Because sometimes, someone washing your hair can be a lot more sexy in some ways. So there's different degrees, and so we're going to get your feedback to various questions to see what you think of. Okay, well, let's start with the first question, and we're going to go to Lissandra first. Last on, first up. What is intimacy beyond sexy times?
All right. I would say intimacy to me equals some level of vulnerability. And that becomes earned over time. And as the characters get to know one another and reveal more of their authentic selves in the process. So beyond just sex and physical desire, intimacy to me would be, one, an emotional risk and being fully seen, even if it feels a little scary or uncomfortable, especially, if it feels a little scary or uncomfortable. And two, vulnerability, perhaps that slight loss of control balanced out with that trust that the other character will be there to lift and reassure. So it's certainly not always perfect. Sometimes it's really messy, but that's what makes the stories I know I like to read authentic and engaging.
Okay, that's a good answer. Jane, your feedback.
So I think this is a really interesting topic, and I really appreciate being on this panel because I feel the entirety of my body of work deals with a lot of emotional intimacy. I'm writing historical romances, specifically Regency, early 1800s, and that means the majority of my characters are closeted to some degree, whether they're closeted to themselves, to their family, to their friends, to their network. Like there's a lot of kind of secrecy involved in my characters' lives. And that secrecy means that you have to build trust and connection with other people because my books wouldn't get very far if my characters didn't tell anybody that they were queer. Like there'd be no chance to build a relationship on the page. So very early on, like my characters often have to reveal their queer identities to each other, even if they don't trust each other in other ways right off the bat. And that degree of trust and honesty and connection, like on some level, is very intimate, even if it might not be physical yet. But just the idea that you have to trust somebody when the risks are so high, like these people are living in a homophobic society where they could be persecuted. Like they have to risk a lot in order to get anywhere in their relationships. And that to me, like, is a very interesting dynamic to showcase the intimacy, like against kind of the harsher reality of the world around them.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the biggest thing I remember from Regency books at all is sometimes just a hand touching someone else's hand could be almost blasphemous in the level of intimacy it implies. So, yeah, that really does take you beyond the sexy times, just in the environment. Okay. Marie, what's your take on intimacy beyond sexy times?
Yeah, so my first two books with Bold Strokes Books, the one that just came out, Musical Theater Mondays, and the one that will come out in the winter, um, Showmance, are both theater novels, and I swear I read other things. But one of the things that I like about using theater as a framing device is that you have artists who really have to trust each other with what's going on inside their heads and their hearts, and that leads to a lot of emotional intimacy and mental intimacy before you get to physical intimacy. So I have really enjoyed working with my characters who are artists because it enables just a lot of intimacy before anybody takes their clothes off or kisses for the first time or anything like that. Um, so for me, it's really about seeing each other, and seeing what you want out of life and what you want out of your time on this planet.
Okay, that's a good answer. Claire.
Um, well, I think that sex is the easy part. You don't have to be really intimate with somebody to have sex with them, but to actually show your real self and not some polished version of you or very little of you. Like you can hold a lot back and still have sexy times with someone, but to actually be vulnerable, to be truthful, to be honest, and to almost bare your soul, I think that's whenever you're being truly intimate with someone. And it's knowing somebody, like, you can almost finish their thought for them, when they're upset, whenever they don't have to tell you what's wrong with them. You're just on a level that you're on that intimate level with them. And it's like a steady type of closeness. It's effortless. You don't you're so comfortable with each other that that's whenever you know that you're truly intimate. So I think it's just getting to that deeper level of just the physical attraction or of lust, if you will, to really get to the root of that person, and that's what intimacy is.
I think that's a really good point that the sexy times is the easy part. You can fall into bed with barely knowing a person, but to just truly be intimate takes a lot. And I also like how all of you have answered what the second question was, is what sort of things do you believe connect characters? You all absolutely answered that. So we're going to go to the next exciting question. Is bearing yourself emotionally better than being naked? And we're going to start with Jane.
This is a tough one to answer. There's no better, there's no worse, there's just different, right? So I feel as a reader, I think it's more emotionally rewarding for me personally to read about the emotional journey and characters that learn and develop and, you know, gain each other's trust and the way that they engage with each other. Like I find that very, very um emotionally satisfying. And the thing I like best of all is when a character knows themselves better through their intimacy with other characters. Like in trusting somebody else or in sleeping with somebody else, like either or both, they kind of learn more about themselves and they have a deeper realization of who they are and why they're behaving the way that they are. And that to me is so rewarding as a reader, but also as a writer. Like I find that very enjoyable to think about, like how all those puzzle pieces are going to come together. So I guess the answer is kind of both. Like it is, the emotion and the sex is very interesting, but the way that each author approaches it is the best part of all because every story is so different, even though sometimes you're dealing with the same elements story to story, but the way authors put them together, some books like it's more rewarding one way and some books it's more rewarding the other way.
Absolutely. Marie.
Yeah, I find it I agree with Jane that it's usually much more fun to show intimacy before, and then of course there's a sex scene, and but I also think it's really fun to play with what um something a little bit more meaningless looks like for a character, and then show by contrast what intimacy, like real intimacy, looks like for them. That's always been a really fun thing in my writing to play with, of like, what does it look like when it's just a one night stand, or, with somebody who's really misaligned in some way? And then what does it look like when you don't force it?
Yeah. And since with your theater background, that reminds me of the fact that in a lot of theater, sometimes taking your clothes off means absolutely nothing because you're doing a quick change. And so boom, you're practically naked, but it means nothing because you're focused on walking out on the stage in like half a second.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so that takes us to Claire.
Yeah, whenever I was sort of looking at this question, I've written both in capital letters as well as Jane said, so I must have been very passionate about that whenever I was planning my answer for this. But I think I can do an example that, if you're reading a book and say it starts with a one night stand, which many fantastic romances do, and they fall straight into bed, there's something very satisfying about reading that and about reading the physical attraction and all the rest of it. But it'll always lead to a point where they've got to know each other properly. There's probably been bumps in the road. They've probably had circumstances together that they've had to overcome. And then by the time you get to the next love scene, there's more of a payoff. It's a lot more rewarding. It's even more satisfying to read. So although that first part plays its part and you can enjoy that part of the story, whenever the intimacy has then got involved, there's something even more rewarding about getting to that level.
Absolutely. Uh, and Lysandra, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with everything my fellow panelists said, and I would even respond that bearing yourself emotionally is definitely a form of being naked, right? Just not in the physical sense. So if you're writing characters who are meant to be falling in love, that emotional intimacy can often be used as a tool to kind of deepen and strengthen that attraction between them and develop love beyond that initial attraction and spicy chemistry. But ultimately, yes, I think both are equally important if it's a love story in order for it to feel authentic.
Okay. One of the things that a lot of us have ended up writing is the sexy times. And I always appreciate when you're writing those times to mix the different types of intimacy, so it's not just physical. Or if you start off with the one night stand can be entirely physical and doesn't have any of the other mixes of intimacy. And so, what sort of things do you do in your work to tie other types of intimacy to these sexy moments, whether they're actual intercourse or just making out on the couch like teenagers? And we're going to start with Marie this time.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I like playing with is getting really small and detailed in the more intimate scenes. And then when something is a little bit, less emotional, I tend to write with a very detached voice. And so for me, it's always really interesting to go between the two and really show when the character's paying attention to everything and feeling every brush of the hair, every moment, as opposed to, oh, it's over, and we were both a little drunk and all of that. So that's a device that I like to use.
Okay. Claire, yeah.
That's me now. Well, I would say so if you're just writing the physical scene, you're really focusing on really the physical act itself. You're not really talking about how the character's feeling. And I think whenever you're writing a more romantic love scene later on, whenever there's feelings involved, it can be like, an admission of caring so much about this person that accidentally comes out, and their vulnerabilities at its lowest, and they just let all the feelings pour out. So you're you're connecting more with what's happening inside the character than what's actually going on in the physical sense, and how, the the love scene can actually connect them even more and make those feelings even stronger. So I think you're seeing on a much deeper level how the character feels rather than just what's happening. I think that's how you can distinguish between the two.
Okay. And that takes us to Lissandra. What sort of things can you mix in with the sexy times to mix these types of intimacy?
I usually try to layer the types of intimacy differently during these scenes to make each one unique and figure out, kind of how to balance that heat and spice with, more of the emotional intimacy. I like to show what's going on inside of these characters during these moments to develop that intimacy that sort of goes beyond the physical during, what's otherwise very physical scenes. And then of course this is really basic, but being intentional with dialogue and word choices during these scenes, depending what I'm trying to accomplish. Of course, we all know, specific word choices, phrasing can make a huge difference in how a reader might perceive those spicy scenes and those characters in them.
Okay. And Jane, what do you think?
I find sex scenes to be very challenging to write. Like they're it's very difficult to make sure you're keeping track of all the hands and the lips and what's happening in the scenes, that you're not um writing something that's like anatomically impossible, or like there's a lot that goes into planning a good sex scene. And for sure, it's not just the physical, it's definitely the emotional as well. What I tend to do in my sex scenes is I write them all at the end, like they're the last scenes that I write in a book. Like I don't really write in order anyway, but sex scenes are always at the last, and then they're inserted kind of where they need to be. Like I know where they should be, and there's often like a lead up in the book, but I feel like I get a better arc when I'm looking at them all like as one kind of singular unit. We're trying to kind of go from where they're first having their first kiss and then evolving into other stages of intimacy and then like perhaps full intercourse, like depending on what kind of sexual arc that they're taking. And it helps me to keep track of the emotional arc as well and to make sure that it's aligned correctly, like during that. So I find that really helpful for me. I only know of one other author that does write that way. Nan Campbell told me she also writes her sex scenes at the end. So I feel like I'm in good company. Nan Campbell's a great writer, so go check out her work. And then the other thing that I was thinking about as I was reviewing this question, Heather, it was interesting because I felt like I was learning about my own writing because I was thinking like, what else do I do differently? And I realized that I use location quite a bit in my work.
Hmm.
A lot of my characters, they might not have the luxury of their own space. Like I'm writing about young women who might be wealthy, titled. They didn't really necessarily have their own houses. Like the characters in the book that I'm talking about right now, actually, the debutante dilemma, that's my most recent regency. They're young debutantes, so they're at their parents' houses and they're in public quite a bit of the time. And they're engaged to these brothers, and so a lot of their scenes together are in public. And I did quite a lot with, like, oh, their feet are touching underneath their skirts, and they're crowded in a carriage together, so they're physically like pressed up against one another. And then my favorite scene of the whole book is when they're at the opera. They're basically on a double date with their fiancés, and there's intermission. The brothers go somewhere else, and the two women are sitting there together, and they start holding hands. And they're in public, people are looking at them, but the way that they're holding their hands gets very sexual, like they're rubbing against each other, they're looking at each other, they're exchanging all of this in full view of everyone because they're just two women holding hands. So it gives a lot of layers, I feel, to my work because they're engaging with the social expectation that they need to be embodying, like that these are women here with their fiancés, but there's another emotional level to their own intimacy that is subtext that other people might not see. And I thought that was interesting because I was like, I do that quite a lot in my books, and I had never done it intentionally. Like it just kind of came out. So I'm glad to have had the chance to review that personally and to talk about it because it's something I never thought about.
Uh, yeah, for me, when I've been writing sexy times, I often include, because it's very common in my life, laughing together. you're having fun and something
Yes.
ridiculous happens and you just laugh and then keep going because it's just these moments of deep connection that are kind of beyond just that physical. It's where you deeply emotionally connect. And yeah, in Regency, the the hussies just sitting there holding hands. Oh
Scandalous.
my, I know. It's just Regency is just repressed. You can get some interesting moments from that.
It gets very juicy, yes.
And because of that, we're gonna get into the next question is which can be hotter? Sharing these deep held truths or these quiet, intimate moments without sex or smut. Which can you make hotter? And we will let's see. Who have I? Oh, we'll start with Claire.
I have both written in capital letters here. So, smut definitely has its place, and it can be very hot. It can, there's books that are just that people just want to buy because they're full of smut, and they absolutely have their place and can be extremely hot in one way, but actually for getting, for connecting with characters and following their connection, it brings it to a deeper level whenever they're having to like, bear themselves emotionally. And what's hotter than that of somebody completely stripping themselves right back inside to so I don't think it gets much hotter than that to really reveal themselves.
Absolutely. Lysandra.
Yeah, I would say it depends on the context of the story for sure. Are they two characters that are meant to be falling in love, or two characters that are super attracted to one another and have really spicy chemistry, but, might just be hooking up? Or, even better, are the two characters already in love and now they're, sort of exploring the depths of their sexuality and each other? Um, I don't think it necessarily has to be one being hotter than the other. Personally, for me, in the books I read, I love smut that follows the sharing of deeply held truths. But everybody has their their preferences and what they read. Both options are great. There's room for everything. And one may or may not work better than the other depending on the story. So.
Okay. And Jane.
I feel like for a lot of these questions, I was with Claire in the camp of like, both are amazing. Like, yes, 100%. But on this question, I am 100% team smut because the qualifier was hotter. What's hotter? And for me, there are other adjectives that I would use for the other forms of intimacy. For me personally, I feel like the sex is hotter, if that's the word we're going to use. Hot. Yes, the sex is hot. And it can be amazing. And it for sure there's other elements to it that takes you on the journey like with the characters. But if it's about hotness, it's the sex. It's steaming. It's great.
I love that coming at it from that angle. I get both, and that's kind of what I was going for. Is which one do you kind of lean towards? And going Team Smut. That's awesome. Okay, and Marie.
I mean, I feel like I have to be in the mood for one or the other. And so my answer is definitely both. Um, but yeah, I think it depends on what the story needs at the time. And sometimes you really need just something really graphic and, really descriptive. And sometimes you need something that's like, just completely emotional and sexual in that way. So I guess my answer is it depends.
Yeah, yeah, and that's very true. It's very much what the story needs. Where is the character's journey leading them, and the character's environment and all these other factors that play into it. So yeah, and that kind of brings me to the last prepared question. So you all are going to get some fun, exciting, off the cuff ones after we're done with this. But Which do you think can make a better payoff for readers? A sex scene or a deeply intimate scene towards the end? And we will dive in with Jane.
I'm back to team both for this one, depending on context. It is one or the other. It really does depend on the story, the narrative, how the author puts it all together. Because there's amazing payoff when there's a lot of like pent up tension, like there's a lot going on. The sex scene can be super rewarding and really engaging and like just what you want. For me personally, as a reader, and especially of historicals, I do find myself leaning more toward like the big finale. Often in queer historicals, like you have to do two things, right? Like you have to make sure that the characters have that they're in love together, that they're going to have a happy for now or a happily ever after. And I feel that you also need to prepare the reader for what the future might look like for these characters, because a lot of the women that I'm writing about, they don't really have their own agency. They're giving up everything. Like they've risked it all at the point of the end of the book. They have risked it all and they've decided generally that they're not going to marry the wealthy titled lord, that they're going to, be together in some way or another with this person in their life, and that happily ever after it's going to look different from heterosexual historical romance. And so you have to kind of prepare the reader for the fact that like it will still be happy and engaging and these characters are going to find a way to be together for, the next 40, 50 years as they go into the even more repressive Victorian era,
Oh
so
yeah.
it's a little bit difficult to do, but to me like that payoff, the idea of it all having been worth it. Like you gave up everything, you risked it all, you risked ruination and, potentially like your family's ruination because reputation was so important to these characters in their social sphere. And at the end, when they've decided we're going to be together, the emotional payoff for that is like spine tingling. Like it's so affirming to know that you can choose something that is harder in some ways. Um, but there's just like this immense reward. So I find that has a better payoff, like for me personally, like as a reader.
And with Regency, especially since you are the only non-modern era writer in this panel, you have that added constraint. And for people who read a lot of Regency, they know the rules and know what to expect. And so they can kind of guess where you're going with things. And so, yeah, the emotional will hit harder because the sex scene it might be a little bit more surprising for the time period and the situations. But, there are things in actual Regency era writing where two women have ended up together and they're, of course, roommates and close friends.
I have some of
And
that for sure. Yeah, I've definitely written some where that's the ending, and you have to engage the reader. And if the reader buys into that and accepts that as part of like the constraint of the world, then it's deeply satisfying. Even though sometimes like we may feel like as modern readers like, oh, that, that wouldn't be enough for me in 2026. But could that have been enough for these people in 1813, 1815? Yeah.
yeah, and I think that's absolutely fascinating stuff. And as Sandy has reminded us, Claire has a book, The Roommate. So let's get your take on this one. What can you get the better payoff for the reader?
So I'm gonna shock you all and say both again. But how I sort of looked at it is that the sex itself has a short-term payoff. So if you're reading that scene, you can enjoy the tension leading up to that, you can enjoy the scene, and you can feel very satisfied after reading that scene. But the other types of intimacy, what's long term, what happens at the end of the book whenever they get together and it's forever and it's for real, that's the part of the story that probably stays with you as the reader. Because if I'm thinking back over books I've read or books I've written, my mind doesn't go to the sex scene that happens early on. It goes to their happy ending and what actually got these two people to last, to decide to spend forever together. So surely that's the long-term payoff. That's the bit that you're going to remember.
Absolutely. Because that's what people are looking for in these stories. I mean, because if you were just going to be reading the sex and the smut, you'd be going for the erotica category, not some of these other categories. Let's go with Marie. What do you think you can get the better payoff with?
I do love a good slow burn. So, the characters kind of getting closer and getting to know each other and all of that, having that payoff at the end of the book with, a really great intimate sex scene for me is the ultimate payoff. So, yeah.
Okay, and Lysandra.
Yeah, to me, I would say they go hand in hand, because they are reflective of different types of intimacy. Um, so to me, it's really one and the same, and they both work together and hopefully kind of complement each other for the story and what's hopefully going to be a really amazing payoff.
Okay, and now the off the cuff section. Hope you're all ready. Uh, since we've talked about these both and things and how we can get that that level of intimacy can pay off. What sort of device do you find in your writing is the best sort of non-sexual intimacy that you as a writer enjoy engaging with? And we'll start with Marie.
Right now I'm really enjoying playing with since many of my characters are artists, working on their deepest truths and revealing those deepest truths through their art and having somebody see them, I think can be really attractive, and can kind of speed up the intimacy. So that's always been a device that I've leaned on.
Okay. And we'll go with Lysandra.
I would say communication, sort of that, and when I say that, I mean, sort of that growing vulnerability, that slow kind of peeling back of the onion where, the two characters are getting to know each other on a deeper level, and sort of deepening and strengthening, what may initially just be an attraction into something a little bit deeper. I like kind of exploring that with my characters a lot because I think it's a good way to also develop the characters and say a lot of things about them, and about their personality and things like that.
Okay. Jane.
I find what I do with that is I have my characters in the social settings. So like they're usually at these lavish parties, like they're at ballrooms or they're at the opera or they're at garden parties. And there's a lot of social expectation, like and hierarchy. Like you're supposed to behave in a certain way and you're supposed to engage with your peers in a certain way. And you certainly are aware of who is your peer and who is not. And so the way that the characters um, interact with each other in that magnified social lens, that is where I put a lot of kind of intimate details. Like if there's a faux pas or somebody acts like a little gauche, like in my recent book, The Debutante Dilemma, the two characters go to an engagement where one of them, she's an American and she's very bubbly and extroverted and like she's really like delighted by everything, but it's very almost embarrassing to her British counterparts. We're like, oh, like it's so gauche to be like so excited about these little mundane things, like, oh, she must be, from the colonies. Like it's really like a bit dismissive. But the way that the other main character reacts to her and she's really drawn in by that artlessness. And she thinks to herself, like, well, I don't want to be like the other people in my party who are looking down on her and maybe snubbing her a little bit and being like a little graceless, like in their interactions with her. The way that these two interact and the embracing of that kind of like gauche behavior, that brings the characters together and it means that they can trust each other and that they can, start to think like, oh, like, is there something, can we rely on each other a little bit here? Like I do a lot of like intimacy work in group and social settings that really demarcate how these characters are as opposed to like how their social world operates and how other people might be operating towards them and trying to maybe pit them even toward like against each other. So I do quite a lot of work about, well, it really involves a lot of secondary characters and the social setting.
Okay, Claire.
Um, yeah, there's a number of things. Well, just even mentioning the roommate, it's sort of it's the near misses. I like to put those in, the will they, won't they. So obviously with the roommate, it was two people living in the same house, and there was encounters in the middle of the night in the kitchen and those sort of things, where the feelings sort of, the stakes go higher. But it's building that tension, and then just ending the tension where it's going to carry on for a little bit longer, so it keeps the reader guessing a little bit. The other thing I really like to lean on is the first meeting between the two characters. I like that to be, a real memorable experience. So I do try to, to really hone in on it and try to make it something that's going to stay with the characters that they're going to remember. So from that very first moment, you're absolutely rooting for these two to get together, because whenever they first met, there's been something so powerful to bring the chemistry between the two characters that it's just a page turner to see how are they going to get together, how are they, when are they going to get together. So just building that tension from the very first meeting, I think, is what I would really lean on.
Yeah, like everyone said, communication is a big thing because honestly, people are terrible at it. I mean, if you just look at everyday people, we're not the greatest at saying things that we mean deeply or opening ourselves up. And so, yeah, communication could be really good. But one of the things I like to lean on, and this is going to lead us into our next question, is remember when you were younger and the thought of touching someone's hand made you sick to your stomach in anticipation and nervousness? And that's this deeply powerful thing. And then you finally touch and it's just electric. How do you try and get that encapsulated moment into your stories? And we'll start with Marie.
Um, I always try to make that moment unexpected, right? It can be, a brush of the hands, or, maybe eh, everybody's just kind of hanging out and then somebody, leans in or hugs somebody. I try my best to make it a little bit unexpected and have there be a little bit of an emotional and physical surge when that touch finally happens. Um, because I find that moment to be one of the most exciting in a story.
Absolutely. Jane.
I definitely agree. Like having like having the moment be unexpected. Like you've prepared for it, you've thought about it, you've maybe fantasized about it, and then when it happened, you're like, "Oh my God, I wasn't prepared for that." Like here we are, like in public, like I was just reaching for some lemonade, and oh my God, there was this hand, and it belongs to her. And I think like the reward of that is so gratifying because especially if there's on-page dwelling about what that should have felt like, and then you're like, "Oh no." What it actually felt like was totally different. Like I wasn't expecting it to be so physical, or I wasn't expecting to feel it in, other places. Like, oh my goodness. Like there's a lot of that goes on with like the setup of how you thought it was going to be and then the actual physical payoff, which is often very different. And I love that you asked this question because I played with that a little bit in this book. I actually had a bit like where they're at this event, and there was a bit of kind of 19th century scientific experimentation that was like a bit of a fad at the time. That like sometimes you would go and there'd be like a little scientific demonstration because it was all very new and very exciting. And so they're at this event where this kind of scientist is there with a box, and he just says, "Okay, everyone, hold hands," and then this gentleman is going to hold the string. And so he's holding the string, and it's attached to a box. And basically, what they're doing is they're producing static electricity in the machine. They're winding it up. And then when it goes, the spark goes up the string and then through everybody's attached hands. And I had my two main characters holding hands, and like there's actually this electric spark that literally happens, and they spring apart. And the one who thought she was straight all this time was like, "Oh my God, like what is this? Like, is there magic in the box? Like, what are these feelings? I don't understand what they are." And so I really played with that a lot in this book because of how much I love that moment where you touch somebody and it's just like sparks literally fly.
That's that's amazing. That's taking that moment and jumping it to another state entirely. Claire.
Yeah, I think it can definitely happen in those unexpected ways, but it can also happen in the way that you expect, and that's whenever you get to the point with your two main characters where they both totally let their guard down and all the tension that's finally been building, and that's when they finally allow themselves to have this moment because it's almost like they avoid having this moment whenever they're trying to fight the attraction or whatever, whatever reason that they're not together. So it's like everything's leading up to this moment, and then it's the time whenever you really get to have fun with the character because after this moment happens, it's whenever they turn into an absolute emotional mess, really, isn't it? Like you're really you're playing with their emotions. They can't think about anything else. They can't do anything else. So yeah, it's a really fun bit to write, and just that all consuming how it completely consumes the character after that moment. Because even they were getting on with their own lives, they were doing their things, and maybe there was an attraction there, but after that moment, it's all about the feelings.
Absolutely. And Lissandra, the last word is yours.
Yes, I try to intentionally build up to it, and in doing so, create tension. Maybe someone's trying to resist how they feel, maybe they're trying to, both fight it. But I think showing what's going on inside each of the characters leading up to it and during is really important. So.
Absolutely. And thank you, everyone, for being on our panel. This is wonderful. Please, everyone who's watching, check out the books of Claire Forsythe, Jane Walsh, Marie Incontrera, and Lissandra Rowe. Check out mine if you want to, but these people especially, because they definitely have some really interesting insights into this topic. And remember, the ebooks are on sale this weekend for everything from the 25 to 26. Thank you all so much. You have made this an absolutely wonderful panel. Thank you again. Everybody have a wonderful day and hope to see you on another one of these panels or readings.